I've reviewed the MG4 a couple of times on this channel, but there's one version that so far has eluded my attention. Well, now I've got my hands on it. It's the XPOWER. It's got 429 horsepower and it's insanely quick, but is it any good to drive? Before I go into the details though, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel. The MG4 XPOWER doesn't look significantly different from other MG4s. For some, that's a drawback. Apart from these orange brake calipers, there's nothing much to say this is the high performance version of this car. Although the 18-inch Cyclone alloys are exclusive to the XPOWER, there's not even a badge on the back to say which version of the MG4 this is. There are no trim levels to choose from with the XPOWER. This is basically the MG4 trophy level of trim with a few extra bells and whistles. This lovely matte finish racing green paint is exclusive to the XPOWER. Although you can also choose the orange, red, black, grey, white and blue options available with other MG4s. But with so little to say this is the XPOWER externally, it is a bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing. Let's take a look at what's inside this unassuming exterior. The XPOWER does have different upholstery compared to other versions of the MG4. These seats are now finished with black Alcantara rather than the leather style or cloth of the SE. But I'd like to have seen bolder stitching and maybe seat bolts in a bolder colour to match the brake calipers. The driver's side is electrically adjustable, but it is on the trophy too. But the passenger side is mechanically adjusted. Both seats are heated though, and so is the steering wheel. There's quite a large storage cubby here under the armrest, and then a much shallower one here in the middle under a sliding door. Then you get a couple of cup holders. There's both types of USB and a standard 12-volt car power adapter. Up above is a pad for your phone, and that's got a wireless charger integrated. The glove compartment is reasonably sized. You could probably fit some work gloves in there. Thanks to the MG4's skateboard design, there's plenty of room in the back for rear seat passengers. There's a single USB Type A port for them to charge their devices. However, there are no vents for air conditioning in the rear. There's also no middle armrest, and the sunroof available in some regions isn't available in the UK. But there are seat back pockets for your kids to keep their copies of The Story of the SVR, or whatever it is kids read these days. Boot space on the XPOWER is exactly the same as other versions of the MG4. With the rear seats up, you get a fairly typical 363 litres, but you'll notice that there isn't actually enough space under the floor to put these charge cables. But of course you can also drop the seats forward in a 60-40 arrangement, which gives you a fairly flat boot space. The capacity is now 1,165 litres, which is fairly generous for a hatchback. You could definitely take this car shopping or go on a family trip with it, and you can also tow 500 kilograms with this car as well if you attach a tow bar to it. Now we get to what is probably the biggest drawback with the XPOWER. MG didn't choose to equip this car with a larger battery that you get on the extended range, so the pack is only 61.8 kilowatt hours. That means this car only has a WLTP range of 239 miles, and during my rather exuberant test driving of it using mostly sport mode, I only managed about 2 miles per kilowatt hour, so you're really not going to get much more than 120 miles if you drive it like you stole it. You'll get quite a bit more if you drop down to normal or even eco mode, but then why would you do that in a car like this? And you're probably not going to get much more than 200 miles and probably a bit less even then. You can at least charge DC at up to 140 kilowatts, which means you can get from 10% to 80% in about 35 minutes. AC charging at 7 kilowatts will take about 8.5 hours to go from 10 to 100%. So you can go long distance in this car, but nowhere near as comfortably as you can in the extended range version, which would remain our choice if that's your normal mode of driving. The cockpit controls are the same as other MG4s. You get a couple of joysticks, with the right hand one for media and the left hand one for adaptive cruise control. You also get a couple of starred function buttons which can be assigned to different operations, such as changing the engine power or how much regeneration you use. There are standard stalks for the lights and indicators and the windscreen wipers. Turning the system on requires a push of the brake pedal, although I found I couldn't always get the car into drive immediately. This dial is used for drive modes. You've got drive on the right, you twist it for reverse on the left, there's neutral in the middle, you press the centre for park, and there is a separate electronic parking brake. The 7-inch instrument panel is entirely digital. You get ADAS information on the left, then there's a readout of the speed in the middle with a small range at the bottom and your current power level underneath that. And then the right hand side is a custom panel. It's by default set to a trip meter, but you can have it things like music controls as well. There are a few discrete buttons for changing the volume and also for the most important air conditioning functions such as turning on front and rear demisting. However, if you want to control the other aspects of air conditioning, you'll need to use the 10.25-inch infotainment panel. You can see the buttons are pretty large and it's relatively safe to use this while driving, but not quite as good as having discrete controls where you know exactly where they are. Those air conditioning controls appear to come up automatically, then you have to press this button to get rid of them. Then you see the home screen. You can see you've got access to Apple CarPlay, weather, there's the state of charge, you've got the radio function and the sat-nav. The sat-nav is reasonably good, although we found it didn't always find keywords would be put in. You've got live functions, so if we go back there you can see it's got the weather forecast for today, not particularly great, and it's also got pretty cold too. You've also got live traffic involved as well. The most improved aspect, however, is you've got the MG Pilot functions and all the others in this much nicer designed menu system. So you go to MG Pilot, you can see there's quite a few things you can turn on there, convenience functions, lighting, safety. If you go to convenience, you can see here we set the two different star functions of what those buttons actually do. We've talked a fair bit about this in our other reviews of the MG4. It's a much better infotainment system than before. Still maybe some rooms for improvement. It's not the fastest system around, but it's a big step forward for MG. So now we come to the most important aspect of the MG4 XPOWER, how it drives. In theory, this car's 429 horsepower means that it can hit 60 miles per hour in just 3.7 seconds. However, that involves launch control, which involves planting your left foot down on the brake and your right foot down on the accelerator, and then letting go of the brake, and then all hell will break loose. Fortunately, even without launch control, in sport mode, this car is a decidedly quick vehicle. Not quite sure how fast the 0 to 60 is then, but it's still definitely fast enough. It's nowhere near as quick as a Tesla Model 3 Performance or, dare I say, a Plaid, but it feels around the same par as a Tesla Model 3 long range with the acceleration boosts, so that's pretty quick. It's certainly fast enough for UK roads. I have to admit, I slightly prefer the handling on the extended range because that doesn't have a front motor, so the steering is a little bit lighter. I also hadn't noticed this until somebody pointed out on social media, but this car has a slight vibration when you get over 60 miles per hour. Maybe that's something to do with the front motor as well. That said, I don't really mind it, even now I've spotted it. So there we go, that's the acceleration. The suspension also is a little bit soft for a car as fast as this. It's definitely not a track day setup, but the brakes have been improved over the standard version. Overall though, this is a great handling car and the brutal acceleration is addictive. Apart from that vibration I mentioned, this car is pretty reassuring on motorways too. In other words, this is a proper electric hot hatch and the perfect vehicle to help you lose your license as quickly as possible. The XPOWER has the same safety tech as the MG4 Trophy. The pinnacle of this is the latest version of MG Pilot. This includes a very capable adaptive cruise control with traffic jam assist. It will also help you stay in lane. Like other trophy cars, you also get lane change assistance and blind spot detection. There's also rear cross traffic detection, which helps you avoid getting smashed into if you're reversing out of a parking space. There's a 360-degree parking camera as well. MG has quite deliberately made the XPOWER the same price as the extended range. That's £36,495. For a car with this level of performance, that's an incredible price. There really is nothing else to match this car's acceleration for the price. However, the bigger battery makes the extended range the much better all-round choice. The XPOWER is for those kinds of people who want performance that won't be embarrassed by a Tesla for much less money. In that respect, this is the electric heir to the GTI cars of the 1980s. The MG4 XPOWER is a brilliant car. The performance is unbelievable for the money. but you won't get anywhere near so far on a single charge as the MG4 extended range, so that version remains the sensible choice. But if you're not feeling sensible, the MG4 XPOWER will put a smile on your face every time you drive it. I just wish it shouted a bit more about what kind of a hooligan it actually is. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel.